Welcome back friends to the class number 38. In today's video we will discuss about the relationship between the working capital gap and net working capital. So the relationship between net working capital and working capital gap is the main topic of discussion about today. So first of all, let us understand what is the mathematical relation between these two terms. So I have written here the formula of net working capital, that is NWC. The formula is very simple: total current assets minus total current liabilities. We have already discussed in the previous videos. And the second term is the working capital gap, that is WCG in short term. The formula is the total current assets minus total current liabilities excluding bank finance. We will not add bank finance in the current liabilities, short-term bank finance in the current liabilities. Besides bank finance, rest all other current liabilities shall be counted here, right? So what is the relation between these two mathematical formulas? So let us understand by this simple calculation. So let us deduct WCG from NWC. Please ignore the plus minus signs in the end of the results. This is just a mathematical calculation. We only mean to understand the relation. What do we get if we deduct both these terms? So NWC, net working capital, is total current assets minus total current liabilities, and that is total current assets minus current liabilities excluding bank finance, right? And if we open up the parentheses, we will find that total current assets cancel out each other, and we are left with total current liabilities and current liabilities excluding bank finance. So if we set off these two terms with each other, then the only difference remains is the bank finance. So the difference between working capital gap and NWC represents the bank finance taken by the borrower from a banking industry. So this bank finance is a short-term bank finance. Short-term bank finance. So this bank finance include the bank finance taken for working capital purpose also, and it also includes the EMIs which are payable, principal amount which is payable in the next 12 months period, that is short-term portion of long-term debt, right? So the bank finance is the difference between the WCG and NWC. So now let us elaborate more about these two terms. Let us try to build a relation between these two terms by the given 3-4 points. So let us study one by one. NWC and WCG, working capital gap. So NWC represents the current assets financed from long-term sources. So what does NWC represents? If it is positive, then it represents the current assets financed from long-term sources. We have already explained it in the previous videos. Let us summarize here before once more. So suppose if your current assets are rupees 100 and current liabilities are rupees 50. Current liabilities are rupees 50. So suppose this is a balance sheet. And suppose long-term assets or non-current assets are nil, 0. Your current assets are rupees 100. Current liabilities are rupees 50. So balance sheet total always tallies. So this is rupees 100. So that means the 50 rupees here would be non-current liabilities. Non-current liabilities, that is long-term liabilities. So that means these 100 rupees are financed, 50 rupees from long-term liabilities and 50 rupees from current liabilities. So NWC here is rupees 50. So that means these 50 rupees represent the long-term funds used to finance the current assets. So this is the basic meaning of positive NWC, right? So what does WCG represents? It represents the current assets financed from both long-term sources and bank finance. In WCG, we do not count full current liabilities. We count only other current liabilities which we do not add up bank finance here. So suppose if in these current liabilities 20 rupees is the bank finance, 20 rupees is the bank finance which was taken for working capital purpose, then the other current liabilities would be here rupees 30 and bank finance would be rupees 20, right? So these 100 rupees current assets, the working capital gap here would be rupees 70, because the other current liabilities after deducting 20 are rupees 30. So 100 minus 30 is equal to rupees 70. So 70 is the working capital gap. So this 70 rupees working capital gap is financed 50 rupees from long-term sources and 20 rupees from bank finance. So here the positive WCG represent the current assets financed from both long-term and bank finance sources, right? So it is a kind of bigger term. WCG is a bigger term since the difference includes both long-term and bank finance sources. But NWC is a smaller term in terms of value because it includes only the difference only represents the long-term sources of finance. So another difference here is the higher the NWC, if NWC is higher, so if I will write it again, if current assets are rupees 100, current liabilities are rupees 50, NWC is 50, right? If I reduce the current liabilities to 30 or I increase the current assets to 120, then the NWC will come with more amount. So higher the NWC, higher the long-term funds invested in current assets. So whatever the difference of NWC is, this difference represents the long-term funds invested in current assets. So higher the difference, higher the funds investments in current assets, right? So in WCG also, if higher the WCG, since WCG, the net WCG represents the current assets financed from long-term sources and bank finance. So higher the WCG, which would mean higher the funding taken from long-term sources or bank finance or both by the company. Now we come to the negative part. What does negative NWC represents? Negative NWC represents the short-term funds, in other words current liabilities, being used in the long-term investments. Short-term funds, current liabilities being used in the long-term investments. Let's build a balance sheet here. Balance sheet. So suppose there are no long-term sources, no non-current liabilities, I mean to say, only current liabilities of rupees 100. Current assets are rupees 80, right? So the balance sheet total must always tally. So therefore there would be non-current assets or long-term assets or fixed assets of rupees 20 here, right? So NWC in this example is minus 20. So this negativity in NWC represents the short-term sources invested in long-term assets, right? Which is a kind of fund diversion. But in WCG also, the meaning is same. If there is a negative WCG, that means funds is diverted in long-term assets. But there is one thing that you need to know here. I will explain it with the example. Suppose total current assets are rupees 100. Total current liabilities are rupees 110. And out of this 110, rupees 25 are bank finance. 25 are bank finance, short-term bank finance. Short-term, right? So in this example, your NWC is minus 10. NWC is minus 10 and your working capital gap is rupees 15. Working capital gap is rupees 15, which is positive, right? So by this example, I mean to say that your NWC can be negative and at the same time your WCG can be positive. It all depends on the nature of bank finance, which was the crux of this this point. This point states that your 100% of bank finance is used in the creation of long-term assets, which would mean that if your working capital gap comes negative, then it would mean that all of your bank finance, since your working capital gap represent the long-term sources and bank finance, it would mean, negativity would mean all of your bank finance is invested in long-term asset. All of your short-term bank finance is diverted. Negative WCG is more critical for you as a banker because it will tell you that all of the bank finance is diverted in fixed assets. But in NWC, here you will see that only 10 rupees are diverted in long-term assets and the bank finance is rupees 25. On conservative side, we can think that these 10 rupees are funded from the bank finance. That means 15 rupees of bank finance is not diverted towards long-term assets. 15 rupees worth of bank finance is not diverted towards long-term assets. the negative NWC represents that. But in WCG, if it comes negative, then it would mean whole rupees 25 would have been used in long-term assets. Then that means 100% of your bank finance is used in long-term assets, which is too much concerning for the lenders, right? NWC is used by every stakeholder in the industry. WCG is used by the bankers majorly, right? So this is the common difference and relationship between these two terms. In the next video, we will discuss about the issue in the calculation of NWC. Stay tuned with this channel. Thank you very much.